Good morning, everybody. Michelle Greger from San Jose City College, Spring 2020. This is for Ceramics 46A, 46B, and Art 89. Today we're going to be talking about decoration, line, pattern, and narrative in ceramics. I'm excited to talk about this. This is going to be a very brief overview, a little sampler of all the infinite possibilities that exist in decorating your work. I'm going to have a link on the Pinterest to a lot more images for you to look at. But let's start out with looking at some beautiful images from ceramic history. The first one I have here is this tea caddy from Japan. This is from the 1600s, from the Edo period. And you can see here that there is a fish being netted. And the variation of line, the movement of the fish, makes this a very compelling type of story that's done without words. So when I'm talking about narrative, I'm talking about telling a story. The next piece I'm going to show you is this wonderful Egyptian piece from 3500 BCE. This piece is over 5,000 years old. You can see, if you look closely, is there's a boat, there's a cabin, a couple of cabins on the boat, and underneath a flock of perhaps flamingos. It's telling a story. It's making our imaginations create the story for ourselves without being told in words. The next piece I'm going to show you is a wonderful example of narrative work, and it's this MIMBRES bowl. This MIMBRES bowl is from the year 1000 approximately, and you can see these turkeys eating centipedes. It's such a fun piece. It's got this wonderful border around it. And we'll talk about banding briefly, but what I'd like you to notice is the thinness and thickness of the band and the variation between the line, and how using a variety of lines gives you more visual interest. The next piece I'm going to show you is a piece from Korea, and I want to talk briefly about symbols and symbolism and cultural significance of symbols. By looking at this piece, you see this wonderful tiger portrayed here, and think about the attributes of a tiger, its ferocity, its courage. And so perhaps the symbol may change from culture to culture, but it's important to recognize the symbols that we know, and also to recognize that symbols are different from culture to culture. For example, in Greece, the symbol of the owl is associated with Athena, the goddess. And in some cultures, the owl is a symbol of death. So the same symbol can mean very different things throughout different cultures. I'm going to bring up the idea of line, and how line is such an important decorative element in pottery. This piece is an ACOMA pot. It's from New Mexico. It's a contemporary piece. And this piece shows these wonderful contrasts between black and white in this dynamic line. It's a diagonal line. A diagonal line implies movement. It implies energy. And you can see this all over pattern on this pot. Leads your eye all around the pot and gives a great deal of excitement and energy. The next piece I'm going to show you is this incredible piece from Iran. This piece is over 6,000 years old, and it's portraying an ibex. It's also a great example of how lines are used for banding and for framing the central element of the piece. It draws all of our attention to the main event, which is that beautiful animal. This next work I'm showing you, this beautiful bowl, is from Anatolia, from Turkey. And you can see the flowing quality of these lines, and also how it's a great example of radial symmetry. The lines make us look all around the pot. Soft flowing lines that are from thick to thin, or from thin to thick. And you can also see that it sort of suggests fish. So without being extremely explicit, it gives us the feeling of flow, of movement, and of harmony. The last piece that I'm going to show you is this extraordinary piece from Crete, the island of Crete. This is a Minoan piece, and this piece is a wonderful example of an all-over design. It's this octopus. You can see it moves all over the whole pot. There's thinness and thickness. It's got a great sense of naturalism. We can see the sureness of the artist's hands, the improvisational quality of this painting, and I'm going to leave it at this for history, but there's a lot more to see. So I have some pots here from my own collection, and I'd like to talk about them briefly. I'm going to start out by talking about this pot by the potter Vince Montague. You can see that he has a very graceful, very loose feeling with his line. He's describing something that we recognize as a plant, although he's not giving us any fussy detail, so it's really a powerful way of expressing nature with this very loose line. I like the way he's using thin to thick and using different color slips to describe this natural form. So what he's really interested in is giving an overall feeling of his response to nature. What he's not doing is getting into the minuteness of accuracy, and I think it's a really strong piece. The next piece is this cup by Ben Carter. He's a wonderful artist who's also working with a floral design, but in this case he's been inspired by his grandmother and his mother, women who he grew up with who worked with textiles, so he was influenced by their work. So you can see that this piece maybe would remind you of some fabric that was sewn into an apron or a quilt. This piece here is by an artist named AYUMI HORIE, and she's an artist from the East Coast, Japanese-American artist, who does wonderful work. She uses some really interesting marking, and she's telling a little story here, but the story is for us all to interpret. You can see there's these two little bunnies, and they look like they may be comforting each other, or maybe they're partners, or maybe they're brothers and sisters. We don't know. She leaves that for our interpretation, which I think makes it even more interesting. This last piece is one of my favorites. This is a little tiny tumbler cup by the artist Julia Galloway. She's an artist from Montana, and she is, in this case, drawing what she sees in her own home, which I think is such an appropriate piece to talk about during these days when we're all stuck at home. So Julia is using this cup as a canvas for recording what she sees. And I love that this piece really shows her daily life. You can see there's a bag of groceries, there's dishes in the sink, there's a potted plant with some little pair of shoes there. And I like to contrast this with some of the Greek pottery that we can look at that talks about great mythic adventures and heroes and heroines, and bring it back to this little pot by Julia Galloway, which talks about domestic life and simple things. All of these pots are really important companions in our lives. And look around you. Look at what the pots that you use. What does your coffee cup in the morning look like? Start paying attention to the decorations of things you see. Next, we'll talk about some ways of decorating our own pots and devising pattern.